was going through quite a hard time. I was struggling mentally to deal with things. We all have a capacity in which we can deal with things, because everything I thought I knew in order to sort of endure those struggles wasn't enough. Fortitude, resilience and Arete, they are our guiding principles, and I behave and act according to those. It's all well and good talking about it, you've got to be it. In order to see the other side, you've got to push through. Ask yourself, do you really want to change? Stuff are more in our mind than we do in reality.
I'm not sure if you would have heard this from listening to our previous episodes, because we started it like halfway through, is we get the last guest to ask the next guest a question. And usually we've planned who they're asking it for and give them a bit of a background. But I was meant to be recording one yesterday and they dropped out.
Oh dear.
But there's a question left for them, and I think it's equally as appropriate for you. Okay. So the question was, when things get difficult, and this could be for you or for your athletes, what's the place like that you go to get through it?
So how do I overcome that difficulty?
Yeah.
Obviously it depends on what it is. I think I always go back to the values and principles of how I sort of guide myself in general in life and in my coaching. You know, firstly, is it within my control? Am I able to influence it? If I can, then how? Understand that how piece, then that will determine obviously what you do in order to overcome that difficulty or obstacle, as they say in Stoicism. And then go from there. And if it's not within your control, then, you know, why worry about it? Just, if there's nothing you can do, there's nothing you can do. Accept it and move on.
Yeah.
Pretty much. As simple as that, really. I don't know if that answers that, but yeah, that's it.
That is one reason why I wanted to get you on specifically on the podcast, and why you was one of the first names I thought of when I started up the podcast.
Oh, right.
Was just your sort of mindset and your philosophy to everything, like how I see you like approach life. You've already mentioned Stoicism, so that sort of sums it up for me.
Steers us next. Is that what they call a segue? Into,
yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah, a little segue into Stoicism.
Okay. All right.
So yeah, like tell us a bit about your mindset with everything.
So firstly, who I am now is not what I was 5-7 years ago. And my mindset and my approach to things have changed through a necessity. I was going through quite a hard time in life. I was in a moment where I was struggling mentally to deal with things through personal circumstances. And at the time I was serving in the army abroad in Germany, and I kind of, the army, so one of the things I've learned from the army was resilience, enduring difficult circumstances and overcoming those circumstances through sort of, purposeful action and effort. But we all, despite that, we all have a capacity in which we can deal with things, and I think I was reaching my capacity, although my capacity to deal with things is quite big, and that's come through training, just military life and the sort of arduous nature of that. Particularly when you've been in 30 years, you've done quite a bit to sort of train that. But we all have a limit, and I was reaching that limit, and I kind of knew I was reaching that limit, and I was on the verge of a mental breakdown. So I needed something to sort of overcome that, because everything I thought I knew in order to sort of endure those kind of struggles wasn't enough, which is fine. I understood that and knew that. So I needed to find something to help me get through that. And my first kind of introduction into Stoicism came about a book I was reading called The Compassionate Samurai. And there was a story in there. So I was led into that book by Charles Poliquin, the strength sensei, as they call him. Some of the listeners might be aware of him. And one of his books was Compassionate Samurai, and some of the stuff he mentioned in there sort of drew me to that. And I was reading that book, and there was a story in there about how the first person, an American pilot, to break the sound barrier, and how he sort of got through that. And essentially that story sort of steered me into sort of overcoming what I was going through. And the story is pretty, and I actually told this story to my son when he was going through a bit of a difficult time as well, so hopefully that sort of helped him, but because it helped me. And the story is basically the pilot that broke the sound barrier, and he succeeded through the act of just continuing, just pushing through, where everyone else stopped and failed. He actually pushed through. So his philosophy, so basically all the pilots that were going through the tests, they all stopped at the point where they thought it was going to fail. So the plane was going through such a rigorous journey of trying to break this barrier. So the pilots were in there, and everything around the plane was shaking. They could see rivets coming apart, and a lot of them would bail out the test flight. They either crashed or they just bailed out. And this pilot, I can't remember his name, but he was at that moment, and he thought, right, if I stop, I fail. If I carry on and I push through, I might still fail, but at least I carried on, I pushed through. And basically he just pushed on through, kept pushing through. Yes, the plane was coming apart, he felt like the plane was coming apart, but it wasn't. It was just what he had to go through in order to break that barrier to get to the other side. And then he carried on, pushed through, and he broke the sound barrier. The plane was fine. So it's kind of like, in order to see the other side, you've got to push through. If you don't push through, you won't see the other side. It's kind of the moral of the story. No matter how bad it may feel, you've got to push through that obstacle or that difficulty. When I was reading that, I was like, okay, I understand. I've just got to keep pushing through. And I did, through various other mechanisms to help cope. And that story just spurred me, just to sort of, there's light at the end of the tunnel, Gary. But the only way you're going to get there is if you push through. That's the only way you're going to see it, is if you push through. And I think that's just a story to be had for anyone. No matter the difficulties that you're facing, you just got to keep pushing through. There will be light. There is light at the end of the tunnel. If you can see it, you've got to get there. The only way you can get there is by pushing through. And sometimes, I hear other people saying, you've got to, if there's an obstacle, navigate around the obstacle. And I don't agree with that. I think you've got to overcome the obstacle in order to get there. And by overcoming that obstacle, you learn more about yourself and you become more resilient. By avoiding that obstacle, the only thing that you learn is, in order to overcome something, you're going to avoid it. In a lot of things, you've got to face that difficulty in order to overcome it. And then from that, you will learn something, and you'll be able to endure more and become more resilient, which is, for me, resilience is an emotional stability. And I think, and that's kind of it really. That's sort of led me into Stoicism, because that book was loosely, I feel like that book was loosely based on Stoicism, but a different kind of philosophy. I just, somehow it led me to Stoicism. I'm not quite sure how, but like anything, if you put something out there in the universe, it will come to you. And I think that book led me to Stoicism. It was meant to be, kind of that way. And then from that, understanding Stoicism, it made me realise that I had those attributes of a Stoic, if you like. I don't class myself as a Stoic, by the way. Just some of their practices or their proverbs or their sort of preachings, if you like, is kind of how I was anyway, who I was. I didn't really realise it, but then reading the books and the passages and things like, okay, I'm kind of like that anyway. So it brought out more of awareness of me and who I am, and perhaps some of the thoughts I have and why I kind of have them thoughts and actions, because we all have thoughts, but there has to be an action behind that in order to determine who you are and how you do things. It's no good just thinking about it. You've got to do it, and that's it, really, I suppose. And ever since then, that's I still read books on Stoicism and kind of that kind of philosophy to sort of steer my sort of way in life, and how I coach. Part kind of my coaching philosophy as well, and my sort of my philosophy and my kind of, what's the word? I was thinking about it earlier. You have your coaching philosophy, but then you have your coaching style. So that shapes my style as well of coaching. It all ties in really as to who I am, who I want to be, and how I kind of use that then to help shape, the lifters, the athletes, or the members to be a kind of better person or be a better version of themselves, however long that's going to take, because I'm learning now that change for people is very different for each one of us. Change is very different, and how that is and how that looks, and the outcome is also going to be different. So how I coach is very much, I'm losing my train of thought slightly, I apologise. Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, I think the change is for them is very much, they come to you, they don't really understand, so your approach to them for me is how I sort of guide myself. So I try and use my own experience, my own sort of values and principles to sort of help guide them, so they understand themselves what change is needed for them, and I don't seek to give them the answers, I just seek to help them find the answer for themselves. That's kind of my sort of philosophy and approach to coaching. Some of them don't quite find that approach. My approach can be quite direct, and challenging, and as it should be. Otherwise, there will be no change through challenge. You just be the same. If you come to me, then there's a reason for you coming to me, and that reason is probably because you're seeking some kind of change, and you might not know what that is, but you'll probably through time understand what that is, why, and then how you're going to go about that change. Yeah. Bit of waffle from me. There you go. That kind of sums it all up. But the approach is going to be different for each person.
It's very individualised, especially in weightlifting, where it's a very one-on-one thing. I've found that coaching gymnastics is quite similar to weightlifting in the sense that you're there with, although you might be in a group scenario, you're trying to get the best out of each individual. It's very what can I do for you? And you're finding different ways and different approaches for each gymnast, each athlete. Whereas in a team sport, it's more about how can you get them working together. Because you also coached football, didn't you? Football? Yeah, was it football?
No. No, not football. It's always been some kind of strength training or Olympic weightlifting. Yeah, but even if it's an individual sport, they're in a group environment. So there's still an element of meeting the individual needs, but it's shaping the environment that everyone is working together. There's no I. Even if it's, a weightlifter, gymnast, yes, it's very much an individual sport, but you're still working within a team construct. You've got a coach, you might have other coaches, you've got other athletes there, although they're doing what they're doing for themselves or for their own needs or whatever, but they're still working together in a team environment. So it's still very much team cooperation and so
it's teaching them the value of being able to be there for each other as well, and have that sort of place in that mini society, because that's what a gym or a facility is essentially, isn't it?
It is. So it's cohesion, team cohesion. I mean, you're all working for a purpose, And either, like I said on the Willpower podcast ages ago, it's, there's different, in your gym, and, you've probably got gymnasts there that are quite high level, or they're working towards that. So the culture within that environment has to be such that it's there to support those people looking to excel. Whether the people there to support each other, those that are there to excel or not, it doesn't matter. They still have to work in the within the values and principles of that environment, so that you're all working to a unified purpose to build success, either for the club or those individuals, or collectively, so you can all drive what it is you're trying to succeed at.
Yeah.
Whether it's an individual or as a team. So I don't believe there is such a thing as an individual sport. There is, but when you're working together, it's no such thing as an individual sport.
Yeah.
It's a team, and you've got to work to such a degree that the team succeeds,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Two things from that I really learned from going to Willpower as an athlete was, firstly, talking about that like team environment and working together and having those values together. Was Justin made it very clear when it's time to support each other, but then when you're like competing as well, or if you're maxing out and stuff, when it's time to sort of look after yourself and be like, no, don't help them changing weights, you're maxing out, so let them do their thing and you do your thing. And that was something I'd never really seen before, was like, yes, work together, but then there's also a time where you have to be selfish. So that was something I found very interesting. And then the other thing was how clear it was what the values were. Like, no matter where I'd been, whether that was like a gym, a sports club, whatever, I'd never seen it so clear what the values of like facility a club was. But when you go to Willpower, it's intent, purpose, deed. It's everywhere. It's not just something that's written on the walls or in a book somewhere. It's something that is lived day in and day out by the members. And I think it was like created this phenomenal place to go and train and excel, like you're saying. Like, everyone's there, no matter whether you're Commonwealth athlete like Jordan and Mikey, or whether you're just like me coming in from the fire service, new to weightlifting. Like, that environment's the same for everyone.
Absolutely. You've all got a part to play, but you've got to understand what your part is, and how you can affect or influence that change or whatever it is that's required. But that's only if the values are clear. You have to make them clear in some way or other. Either you set the example, be that example that you're trying to set. It's all well and good talking about it. You've got to be it. I'm very much a believer in action, not words. Words have no substance. I do, but when you're trying to, put across to people the values of this place or whatever it is, you've got to be it.
Yeah.
You have to demonstrate it in order for them to understand it. They might not understand it straight away. They may never understand it at all, but they're trying to. They're striving to, and that's the main thing. So, for example, in my gym, although it's a small affair, on the back wall there's our emblem, our logo, in a circle, and in it it's got fortitude, resilience, and Arete. They are our guiding principles, and I live by those, and I coach by those, and I behave and act according to those. And a lot of them will see those words and they might not know what they mean, but in time I hope they do, and then they sort of align themselves to that with their own sort of principles. As long as they're aligned at some stage, or they're trying to align themselves to it, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. Because everyone's different, and you can't expect them to come in straight away and be, wham bam straight into it.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen. It's going to take time. And also, if I'm honest, those words are on there for me. I put them there for me to remind me on a daily basis as to why I'm there, who I am, and how I need to be. How I act, what I say, and what I do are important in order to sort of demonstrate that to the members that are there. culture is important, and the values of a culture are important, and they need to be clear in order for people to align themselves to that and drive the success of whatever that team or environment is. So yeah, and yes, you're right. It was very clear there, and that kind of what attracted me there as well was, the atmosphere, the environment, and the attitude, kind of, which has shaped who I am as a coach and how I coach and what I'm trying to establish myself with my own endeavours. We're getting there. It's going to take a while, like anything. It's going to take time, patience. That's the key thing as well, is patience. Let it grow organically without forcing it. And as a coach, leader, you've got to be patient, and I am. It's, to get where I am now in the gym, it's 10 years of vision shaping, knowing what I want to do, finding the right time to do it, and then figuring out how to do it, because I'm still trying to figure it out now. I'm not going to lie. The vision I have, I know what, in my mind, I know what I want, how it looks, but I have no idea how long it's going to take to get there. I have an idea how I'm going to get there, but I'm not 100% sure. But all I know is if I continue the way I am, I will get there.
Yeah,
definitely get there. I believe it. And belief is a big thing for me as well. If you believe it and you can see it, then it will happen. Providing you put the effort in, because there's no reward without effort. I put a post on earlier today about, nothing's given to you in life. It's never handed to you. It's earned. So to be where I need to be or want the gym to be, I have to put the effort in order to be rewarded with that. And it's not going to be given to me. I have to earn it. And I think that's what's lacking in society nowadays, is that understanding that nothing's given to you for free. It's not just given to you. You've got to work for it. You've got to put the effort in, and then you'll be rewarded with whatever it is that you're seeking.
Yeah.
Yeah. And hence why, one of the things that I'm doing is youth development. That's the premise of why Legion Barbell exists, is youth development. Through my own lived experience as a child, and pretty much growing up as a young man to a adult male in 30 years in the army. From all of that lived experiences, I'm like, I'm in a position now where I can utilise that to help shape the younger generation and influence the younger generation for a positive change, if you like. And it's working. I've had the youth side of my development, the program that I'm doing is still early in its infancy, but I've had positive outcomes already. So that's evidence enough for me to say what you're doing is right. You're on the right track. This is shaping that vision. Where I am now is not where I'm going to be. So always keeping in mind that that's where I'm going to be over there. I'm here, but how I am here and how I'm going to be over there is going to be completely different, but I'm on the right track. So, for example, I've had one of the children, two cases have been highlighted to me by the parents on the positive change that I've had with the classes. One lad, he was a big rugby player, he's a 14-year-old boy. He came in to do the training with his brother. And before, he'd play rugby, wasn't very confident in taking tackles, tackling. The season's come around again. He's then gone into playing rugby again. One of the players, the opposite players that he's competing against, or I don't know about rugby, but, was a bigger lad, seemed to be one of the, the tough lads. And he took him down. And, and the coaches and the teachers were like, hey, what's going on here? What's happened here? He's taken down the big players, seem to be like, the top G's, if you like, or whatever. And the parents are like, well, he's been going to Legion Barbell. Gary's been training there. He's developed his confidence. Blah blah blah. So the outcome of that is, one lad he's had the confidence to take on an adversary who seemed to be like, I suppose like David and Goliath. He's like took him down. No worries. Happy days. And like because of that, a couple of other kids have now joined because they've seen the outcome of what you can achieve down at Legion Barbell. And another lad, I run a summer camp, 6-week summer camp. There's a young lad in there, and after 6 weeks, he went back to school, and the teachers and his Senko, his special education needs coordinator, they're all like, "What's happened?" He's a different boy. His attitude, his behaviour's changed. He's confident. What have you done in the last 6 weeks? Well, been to Gary's Legion Barbell. So that's enough for me to warrant what I'm doing is right, and I feel like the last 30 years of what I've been doing has led me to here. So ultimately, it's kind of like what's your purpose? I believe ultimately my purpose is where I am now, and it's taken me 30 years to go through all of that in order to find that. So now I'm going to, work towards that and sort of hopefully create a change, nice positive change for shaping the young people's minds into being more confident, more robust, more resilient human beings, because we need more of that. Society at the moment I feel is pretty weak, physically and mentally, through no fault of their own. It's the way that we've been conditioned, the way we're being driven. You need places like mine, if you like, without sounding too, egotistical about it, in order to sort of have some positive influence in how people are and who they can be, so they can reach their potential, whatever that may be.
Yeah.
It's ultimately what it is, isn't it? Providing an opportunity for human beings or people to reach their potential.
Yeah.
For coaching, for me, it's kind of like I see it as I'm a gatekeeper for opportunity of self-improvement, and coaching them so that they can then coach themselves. And I think that's important because a lot of time people are seeking to be given the answers, and that's not me. I sort of enable it so that they find the answers to themselves, and if they can find the answers for themselves, then they have belief in themselves, and they can then have the confidence to go about whatever it is they need to be doing in order to sort of overcome any kind of adversity or obstacles that they have. And I think that's important. I think there's coaches out there, I think that they're there to bestow their wisdom on people, and they're this all knowing and all, and as a coach you don't know everything. You've got to understand that you don't know everything, and you won't know everything. As long as you're striving to learn more, you're going to be of value to yourself and those that you're coaching.
Yeah.
So that they can then, it's very much you're preparing them to take their own journey and their path. The path is there. It's always been there. You're preparing them to find that path so that they can take that path. And if it comes to a point where they're like, thanks very much, Gary, I've got this, fantastic, go for it. But if it's like they find it, but they're like, I still want you there, and you're more of a supporting role, like a soundboard to sort of mentor or guide a little bit still, and that's fine. Yeah. It's their journey and they're taking it. As long as they've got confidence to do that, I think it's important. Yeah.
So this sort of takes me back towards the whole topic of like your mindset and philosophy.
Yeah.
And you said earlier about how in the military you sort of learnt different ways of increasing your capacity to deal with difficult situations, and it seems like that's something that you're sharing in your coaching. Mm-hmm. What are some of the things that you feel a lot of people could benefit from that you learnt from the army to help them get them through these difficult situations?
So what was the question?
So what did you learn from being in the army that other people could deal with today, could use today to deal with difficult situations? What are some of the tools that you learnt?
No, it's just training, conditioning. Ultimately, everything that we do in order to be better or overcome things is, firstly, it's real change only comes if you really want to change. A lot of people are happy being comfortable where they are, and that's fine. But at the same time, if things aren't going the way that you want them to go, don't blame anyone but yourself. Okay? And that change will only come if you're really prepared to change. And that change means being uncomfortable. There's no getting away from it. You're going to have to face things that you probably don't want to face, whether that's emotionally or physically. Once you've accepted that, then the transformation can begin. And really, in the army, it's kind of like they go through a training, you go through a process of conditioning in order to enable that kind of resilience and ability to endure. And that's just through training and just repetition. Knowing that it's going to be uncomfortable. The army's taught me to be uncomfortable. Being comfortable with being uncomfortable. Because, I've been in circumstances, situations where I've been very uncomfortable. But as a leader, you have to control that emotion so that inside, scared, not going to lie, been scared. But outside, you've got to have a presence that may know you're scared, but you're able to cope with it and make sound, rational decisions. And that's been through conditioning. I've had to and that's why we go through training. In the gym, we go through training. Physical hardship, I genuinely believe, will develop the ability to endure any sort of, it will build your mental capacity as well. Because you see a lot of people go in the gym, people don't train as hard as what they actually think they do. And I tell that to some of my lifters, you think you're training hard, but you're not. But doesn't mean you're not putting the effort. So if you're training really hard or you're putting the effort in, then that is going to build your mental capacity to sort of deal with things. Because failing a lift, what's that going to teach you about yourself? Is it a mental thing or is it a physical thing? So I like to see people fail in the gym, not out of ego, but they're going to learn something from that. And I think that's important. And I always say, accepting failure is part of the process. And, always try to get them to reframe the word fail. You're learning. If you're winning or losing, you're not losing, you're learning. Whether you're winning or losing, there's something to be learned from that. And I think some of the lifters probably find this a little bit hard to understand. It's like, I treat success and failure with the same attitude. I don't revel in loss. I don't revel in success. It's kind of like, if I win or I achieve something, I'm like, good, well done, Gary, pat on the back. Well, what can you learn from that? If I've lost or I've failed a lift or whatever, okay, never mind. What have I learned? What can I learn from that? And then take that to the next level in order to be better. So I don't know if it's actually what have I learned? It's kind of, first, if you want to change, ask yourself, do you really want to change? And are you prepared to go through the process of change or that transformation? And if you are, then accept that it's going to be uncomfortable, accept that you will fail, accept that it's going to be a turbulent journey. It's not going to be a linear from there to there. It's going to be up and down. As long as then you can see where you want to be and put the effort in, then you will eventually get there. Doesn't matter how long, you will eventually get there. And I have to do that. I have to remind myself that on a daily as well. No, there have been times in the last year where I've been like, fuck this. Why am I doing it? I question why I'm doing it. But at the end of the day, I then have to think, why are you doing it, Gary? What's your purpose? Everyone has to ask themselves, what is my purpose? What's my reason to be here? Once you can answer that, sometimes people can't answer that, but they know, they have an idea, and it's going to take time for them to really understand that. Even myself now, I have an idea as to why I'm here. Once you understand that, then the how is the next phase, and that's going to drive the outcome and the sort of process of how you get there. I don't know, did that answer that?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Something that made me think of is taking it back to the story you was telling earlier about that pilot breaking the sound barrier.
Yeah.
Is he was talking about people have to realise that the journey is going to be turbulent and everything. And thinking back to that pilot, and he, like you said, he thought the plane was breaking, but he was pushing through anyway. Then afterwards, it turns out that it was fine, and the plane wasn't breaking. It was just that thing in his head. I think that really relates to people in life. Is they think they're having a really hard time, and they're like trying to push through, but they might be struggling and being like, "Why am I doing this? Like, this is so hard." And then if they do keep pushing and get through it, they'll probably look back and be like, it wasn't actually as bad as I thought it was. Yeah. It was just like, I wasn't used to being in that uncomfortable situation.
Yeah, so it's kind of like that stoic verb or whatever. Probably that was like, we suffer more in our mind than we do in reality. So it's like we have this so it's kind of like we react and respond to our emotions rather than a rational thought, so those sort of, when you're facing a circumstance or a situation, it's kind of, most people are responding to an emotion like, oh, I can't do this, oh, that's scary. Well, yeah, it is scary, but, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
What are you going to do about it? You either face up to it or you don't. If you don't, you don't. If you do, then do it. So it's kind of, let me try it. So you suffer more than mind we do in reality.
It's like the situation itself isn't bad.
It's not
bad.
The
situation is indifferent to you.
Yes.
It's how your perception of the situation.
Exactly, perception of the situation. And it's, goes back to that, controllable and uncontrollable. Do I have control over this? And the answer, some people, I don't know, but if you can influence a situation, then you can control it. You have control. You just got to understand what it is that you need to do. And if you have no influence over it, then why worry about it? So for example, I don't know, somebody hits your car. People get all angry and irate about it, which I can understand, because that means you've got to pay for it and blah 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 blah. But the first thing is like, was anyone hurt? No. Good. Was it my fault? No. So well, it was bound to happen then, and a lot of people will be like, so the rational thought and the emotional response for some people will be like, oh, why did it happen to me? Oh, why me? Why not? It's going to happen to someone, so why not you? Why not? Just deal with it. It's like, if you had no control over that, well, so be it. It was meant to be.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm going to look through my notes.
No worries.
Yeah, no, because it's reading the books, Stoicism. I'm reading a book at the moment. It's called How to Think Like a Roman Emperor, and it gives you the history on Stoicism, and the good thing about this book, it actually sort of helps you strategize certain circumstances and how to deal with them. But what I find is a lot of the books with Stoicism, it gives you practices and stuff like that, but it gives you a stoic verb, and you're like, okay, yeah, that makes sense, but how can I apply that to me is sometimes a difficult thing. And I read a book every morning. I read at least one page of it to try and sort of charge me for the morning, sort of give me the sort of courage to deal with what's needed to be dealt with for the day. Because sometimes, you wake up and I can't be fucking arsed with this. So it's like, yeah, what have I got to do? And So I do that. I read that to sort of, motivate me to keep me going. But this book, go back to the book, it actually gives you strategies in order to sort of cope with certain things. And what I'm reading in the book is a lot of counselling and psychology and their methods is actually based on Stoic principles and things like that, which is quite interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think. And the other thing I'm kind of thinking more is, I don't want to get into this too much, is like religion. It's like, Stoicism or philosophy came before religion. And I feel like when you read some of the religious psalms and verbs and whatever you want to call them, I don't know. But anyway, you look at it and you think, it's kind of like a Stoic sort of mindset and approach to things. So it kind of makes me feel that, religion was born off the back of Stoicism. And it's like, when somebody nowadays catches onto an idea and sort of markets it themselves into something better, or what they think is better. I think that's what religion was about. You sort of saw something in Stoicism and thought, I could do something with that. And we are where we are now with religion. Whatever your thoughts are on that, I don't know, but don't want to get into that. So yeah, I think, so my sort of philosophy of life sort of shapes my coaching. And it's kind of, the more I think about it, it's, from my experiences of leadership in the army, is a coach. I think coach is a leader. And as a leader, you serve, but you're not a servant, okay? And kind of, as a coach, you give, or as a leader, you give the people, your people, what they need rather than what they want. So when somebody comes to you, like I said before, they obviously come to you for a reason. And usually that reason is some kind of result or transformation. And as a coach, you've got to understand what their needs are as opposed to what their wants are, because they might think their wants are their needs. Wants and needs are completely different things. So, for example, a need is something that's necessary, and a want is something that's desirable, some kind of emotion or some materialistic kind of thing. I don't know. So they're two different things. And more often they think their needs are their wants are their needs, but they're not. You've got to give. So as a coach, you serve them their needs as opposed to their wants, because I feel, I did it as like a quadrangle. I'm going to read it out this kind of, so it's, so if they come to you, they're looking for some kind of success, transformation, or the thing, and that's down at the future, isn't it? They come to you for something that's down the line, because it's not going to happen immediately. And they've come to you for a want. If they have a want, and a want is like I've put here, it's like if you're not a coach, if you're a coach and you're not leading them and you're just serving them their wants, then it's going to lead to some kind of blame or denial or some kind of excuse. You're facilitating some kind of denial excuse for them not to sort of have that result or transformation, because you're going to rationalise that as to being acceptable. And what they really want, or what they need, is accountability, challenge, and direct feedback. What they need to hear. And I am very direct in what I say to people, coaching-wise. Very much, this is what you need to. I don't say this is what you need to hear. I say it in a manner that this is what you need to hear. This is what you need. And some of them find that challenging because it's not giving them what they want. And they might not appreciate or understand it now, but down the line when they get the results, they'll understand and they'll hopefully thank you for it or appreciate what you've done. And that's what's going to get that transformation, that result. And if you serve them their wants in the future and they don't get the results or that transformation, then they're going to blame you. And, like I said, if things don't go the way that you want, the only person you can blame is yourself. So that individual needs to blame themselves, and the coach needs to blame himself for not giving them what they needed rather than opposed to what they wanted.
Yeah.
Two different things. Some of the members and lifters are finding that a little bit challenging, and I've explained them to them, that very process as to why I do that. And that's kind of my philosophy. That's kind of my sort of style of coaching, very much direct feedback when it's needed. And a lot of time I'm not actually saying much. I'm just watching. You can learn a lot from somebody by watching them. That's why I like people watching just generally when I'm out and about. And the wife, we sit down, we'll have a coffee on the beach down where we live. And we'll sit down and we just watch people. You learn so much about people. And then particularly in the coaching world, I think observe more, say less. You learn a lot more. And then only intervene if you need to. It's very much, it's very directed to start with. It has to be, isn't it? If they're new to something, you've got to direct their learning process. But then I like to, as soon as I can, sort of step back and let them feel for it and find their own way. I always call it just find their way. Because everyone's different, we're built different, we think differently, we move differently. And trying to shoehorn into this particular technical model, if you like, if you go to weightlifting, doesn't suit everyone. We don't have a system like the Chinese did or the Russians where they knew exactly who they were looking for in terms of anthropometrics, measurements and all that, and they shoehorn them into it. And that worked for them, but it doesn't work for us. So we've got to be a little bit more pragmatic in our approach and flexible. So for me, it's kind of like give them the tools, help them understand what it is you're looking to change, and let them get on with it. And then if they look lost, then you intervene. And I sort of end up having a conversation more than sort of coaching, if you like, in terms of cues, verbal feedback. It's just more of a conversation, because what you see is not what they feel. So you always got to say, how was that for you? How does that feel? And get that from them, because if I give them something that's not in line with how they felt, it might disrupt that pattern of what we're trying to go with the flow and get them into sort of finding their way. So because everyone's got a natural way of moving, and trying to drill something in that's not natural for them might disrupt that and actually take them away from what you're actually trying to achieve. So watch more, say less, and just intervene if you need to. Yeah.
I think something that I've really picked up from you and a lot of the other good coaches we've had on the podcast, not saying that we've had any bad coaches on the podcast, everyone that's come on has genuinely been great, but something I've really picked up from doing this podcast myself is how the coaches don't want to be, like you were saying, they don't want to be the fountain of all knowledge. They don't want to just be there and hold their athletes' hands through the whole process. You want them to learn from you, but learn how to be self-accountable and learn how to do things for themselves, and then get them to pass on. And as bad as a business model that is, that's ultimately what you want. That's why you're a coach, essentially, in my head.
No, totally, because it's not self-indulgent. It's altruistic in that sense. And as a coach, you're, like you say, you're there for a reason. You're there to help people.
Yeah.
To find a better version of themselves and reach their potential. And if you stifle it too much, then they won't find their potential. They won't find themselves. So you've got to give them that freedom to do that. Yeah. And by constantly giving them verbals as a coach, you're not giving them that opportunity.
No.
And just by being silent, letting them get on with it, you're giving them that breathing space. And not only that, one of the other things is kind of, I'm like that as well, is because I had one lady, she was, I have a whole array of people come into the gym. It's only a small affair. I'm looking for a new place to expand, so, which is a good sign, I suppose. And she was like, Gary, I'm very concerned. You're not saying much. I'm like, well, what do you want me to say? What is it you want me to say? I said, look, if I feel you're not doing something right, then I'll intervene. But also, I'm giving your space, because we're in a world where our attention is sort of, is anything and everything's wanting our attention, and we don't have that time for ourselves. So by coming into the sessions with me, I'm giving you that time to be with yourself, find yourself. If you've got me chirping in your ear, throwing some fucking bullshit cues at you, it's just going to disrupt that, and you're not getting that sort of self-time, So there's two reasons why I'm like that. So give them the time for themselves, find themselves, be with themselves, and also just allow them to sort of have the space to find their way within whatever the construct that we're doing. So it's important, I think.
Yeah.
Give them the time, space.
I think coaches like that are the ones that stick around the longest, if they're in it for the genuine care of the people and to try and develop the person, because coaching's a thankless job. Like, you get the thanks from your members and the people you're coaching, but outside of that, it's not good money. There's no notoriety in it, really. Like, you're part of this small niche, you might be known in that niche, but outside of that, no one knows you, no one cares. And if you're in it for fame and fortune, go do something else. Be the athlete. They get the fame and fortune.
Yeah.
Their coach, it's never oh yeah, that person's done it, look at their coach. It's look how well they've done, and that's what you want.
No, you want that. So it leads on to one of my other things. It's their success is theirs, their failure is yours. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You own their failures, but they own their success. I think that's important, but it's a two-way thing. They got to own it as well. But in terms of, as a coach, their success is theirs. Their failures is yours. And they're an athlete for a reason. They're at the top for a reason. I'm not in a position where I've coached top athletes, but I've coached and mentored and led soldiers. Some of them have been at the top of their game. So I've been in a sort of high-performing role before, but not in the world of athletics. But they're there for a reason. They've got where they've got to be by being selfish. And as a coach, you can't be selfish. There are some, but not many that I know. I wouldn't associate myself with people that are like that. And you're there for a reason. You're not there for the fame and glory.
Yeah.
You're there for, I hope, for altruistic reasons. And like you say, to shape people to become better people, better versions of themselves. And I think, it is thankless, but then it leads me on to one of the things I said to one of my lifters a couple of weeks back. If you're doing something that you want to do, then why are you expecting praise or thanks for it from other people?
Yeah.
Because they were looking, I don't want to say too much in case they listen to that. I don't think I'm talking about them, but they were expecting something from me that was their wants, not their needs, and I wasn't going to give it to them. There's a balance to be had, clearly, but so I was like, well, if you want praise, why do you want praise from me for doing the thing that you are wanting to do? If you want praise, that needs to come from within yourself, not me.
Yeah.
Or any other external. It's all within. It's I'm very much a believer in anything that you want or need is from within yourself, not external. It all exists within. So anything that you earn, that you want, but your needs, okay, it's from within yourself. So if you want praise, then praise yourself. I'm a very self-effacing type person. I never seek praise. So if I'm being coached and that's a good rep, well done, I look at them and go, okay, good, cool, all right. And if they tell me that was rubbish, they tell me it's rubbish. I need to know that.
Yeah.
I need to know that. Tell me that, because then it's the it might be sidetracking. It's I apologise. Probably done that all the way through, if I'm honest.
No worries at all.
We're going over time a little bit. So it's I don't know. I'm going to rant. So I'll probably stop there. Not rant, but just being blunt.
Yeah. I definitely saw that in Justin when he was coaching. There were times where because I was one of the morning members for Willpower predominantly, it was quite hard for me to get there in the evenings due to my work. So I was mostly there in the mornings, and sometimes I'd be the only person there other than Justin. And I'd be there and I'd hit a PB, and it was never like, or even if it was like a big Friday and you'd hit a PB in front of everyone's cheering you on, you'd look at Justin and you might just get a nod. It might just be like, yeah, acknowledged, carry on. And that meant so much to me as an athlete. It's just like seeing Justin, he see me, and it's like, yes, I'm enjoying this, and he's just like, acknowledged, move on. And then you just keep training. And there was other times where maybe I'd hit a PB, like especially in the mornings, I'd hit a PB, and he might see that I was annoyed with myself because I knew that I hadn't done the best that I could. It might have been like a new number that I've put on the bar, but the technique was off, or it might not have been the number that I was aiming for, and he would see that, and it again be the same treatment, just like acknowledged. And then how he then approached you later on would be different because he's seen that in you, and then that's him really seeing what I wanted. Did I just want to hit that lift and be like, yeah, like patting myself on the back, or did I want to do better? That was, something that I really learned from Willpower.
Well, yeah, it goes back to wants and needs, isn't it? You're giving them what they need. And it leads me on to one of my other things. It's like you said about when you looked at Justin, he gave you that nod, and you knew that was a sign of approval. Well done. In his way, that was a well done. And it's kind of like, where, in the coaching world, and all these gurus are saying that you've got to know the athlete, and as you should get to know your athlete. But I think that the athlete should also get to know the coach. It's not just a one-way thing, it's a
100%.
two-way thing. So reverting back to the conversation with the athlete, it's like, my praise and my acknowledgement of you doing well is me saying, good. Yeah, good, well done. I'm not going to shower you with, hey, well done, whoa, yay. It's not fucking happening. All right, yeah, good, well done. All right, acknowledged, good. Move on, like you say, move on to, right, what's next? Yeah, or a nod. Yeah, okay, good, well done. Because that's like I said, I coach how I like to be coached. Just give me acknowledged. Just give me something that I know from you is either good, well done, or approval, or tell me what I'm doing wrong. So you've got to know the coach. So when their nuance or their mannerism, you've got to understand that as much as I've got to understand you. And I think that's where, I don't know, I think it's always athlete centric, and that's the way it should be. But there has to be something back from the athlete to sort of understand the coach. So you have a shared understanding of each other. So you're not then not seeking that want, and you're understanding that he's serving you the need, and you understand that. Yeah. And that, I think that's going to take time for some people, and they may never, and that's why some athletes move on from other coaches. And it may be that you're just not meant to be, which is fine. The coach is there, and that coach is going to be for somebody. You're not for everyone. I'm not for everyone, I know that, and I don't want everyone. There's a type of person that I want, and they will either come to me or I'll find them, or those that come to me will realise that he's not for me, which is fine.
Yeah.
I wish you well, find somebody that is. Or perhaps they're not ready, and then eventually they'll come back when they are ready.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that's important.
It's not just about them not being like the right match. It might be, like you're saying, the wrong match for that time. Absolutely. They might be the right match for you at first, and then as you want the athlete to outgrow you, and then if their ambitions are different from where you're aiming to go, they might go elsewhere, and that's okay.
Absolutely fine. Yeah, absolutely. I think it goes, like I said before, it's like where you are and where you're going to be, you are not going to be the same, and the people around you aren't going to be the same people, and that's okay. Yeah. Some people will find their own way. We are all on a journey, and we're like passing ships in the night, and somehow we might come across each other and sail side by side, and then at some point we're going to go on our own shipping lane or whatever.
Yeah.
Which is fine, and I'm happy with that.
Yeah.
And if one of the athletes says to me, "Thanks, Gary, not for me," that's all right. I'm not going to look at myself and think I'm a bad coach or I'm a bad person. I'm just like, it's not meant to be. They're finding they're on a different leg of their journey now, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And if they can if they can see that the other way, then you should be able to part on good terms and be good about it.
Yeah. Bringing that full circle then, I think that comes back really well to being comfortable with being uncomfortable, because a lot of people I find themselves in a situation and they're like, all our paths are going the same way, this is great, and they're sticking with like the same friends, or they're sticking in the same group, the same job, whatever it might be. And then the thing that's stopping them then going like, that's where I want to be, this is where we're headed, I'm going to stay on this path because that's the comfortable path, that's what everyone's doing, we're all going the same way, we're sticking together, this is it. When really they want to be over there, but going over there on your own is uncomfortable. Finding that new group is uncomfortable. And I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with and need to reflect, because there's so many people in jobs that they might have enjoyed at first and now they hate, or they've got into this one sport and they're like, this is going to be the sport for the rest of my life, or this is the club for me, this is my coach, whatever it might be, where really it's like, you've outgrown that now. Like, they're going down a different path. Is that the path you want? Or do you still want that thing over there? And reflecting on that and being like, maybe it's my time to step away and do my own thing. And that's a very uncomfortable situation to be in.
Yeah, it's the very reason people don't change things is because they're comfortable. It's a known, isn't it? And people don't like not knowing what they don't know, or being confronted with that option to change. Some people are like, I'm happy, I'm comfortable. But as a coach, if you make them understand it's okay for them to separate and find their own way, that's okay. That's all part of growth. That's all part of being. We're called human beings for a reason. Most people just exist. No one's actually being.
Yeah. Do
you know what I mean? It's, I don't know, life. So stay on track, Gary, because I was going to go off and say it. But like I said earlier before you recorded, my mind wanders, so a little bit incoherent sometimes. But as long as you as a coach can, maybe not directly, but the way you come across and the way you communicate with them, make them comfortable with the fact that if they don't want to be there, it's okay not to be there. It's okay not to be there.
Yeah.
And like I've always said, if people come, I want them to stay because they want to stay, not because they feel like I'm keeping them there, I'm limiting them. If they, it's, if you want to stay, stay. If you don't. It's okay.
Yeah.
And most people, like you said, they're comfortable being comfortable, and if I'm honest, life is conditioning us to be like that. And I don't want to go into too much, but it's because things are easier to control then, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know what you know, so therefore, you're going to do what you know, be comfortable with what you know, and just allow life to carry on. And we're being conditioned for that, without going into too much. But it's kind of like, the more you can step out of that lane, you might jump back in and out, but the more you can jump out of that lane, test yourself, be uncomfortable with certain things and then come back in, that's okay. It's not like you have to constantly be on a journey to challenge yourself.
Yeah.
But you've just got to be able to know that if I am being challenged, I know what to do. I'm comfortable with being uncomfortable and I can deal with this.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that can't. And I think that's why there's a lot of people that are struggling in life. And that's kind of why I do what I do, because some people aren't there to the gym to be athletes. They need something to sort of mental space. They need that place to help their mental capacity. I can see that in some of the members. They're not there to be athletes. So my approach to them is slightly different. to those that want to compete and things like that, then my approach to you is going to be different. And there's one lady that I have, and she said, I come to you, Gary, because you challenge me. That's the reason I'm there. And I'm like, okay, cool. I know I'm challenging you. I can see it, and you know, and I don't thrive from it, but it makes me realise, you know, that's the reason I'm there, and this is the reason Legion Barbell is there.
Yeah, and like you're saying, that's their need.
That's their need, yeah. And I can see a change in her, and it's rewarding. And then when you hear about those 2 examples of those lads, that is rewarding. To me, that's fulfilling, and that's, you know, part of my philosophy is like living a genuinely fulfilling life, not bound by what society says I should be doing. You know, going out earning millions, having a flash car, having a house. You know, I'm grateful for the fact that I've got a house, I've got a family, I've got a roof over my head, I can feed my kids, I can clothe my kids. You know, don't take those things for granted, because not everyone has that.
Yeah.
Not everyone has that. And the fact that you've got that should be enough for most people. And then outside of that, then seek more. Once you've got that, that's okay. And if you want to seek more than that, that's fine. But you always be grateful for that. And it's... Sorry, I lost my track there. That was leading on to something. Yeah, a fulfilling life. You'll be surprised at how little you actually need to be fulfilled in life, I think.
Yeah.
I was adopted into a wealthy family, and I saw the negative side of having money, and that put me off, because that wasn't me, and I wasn't born into that. They therefore couldn't condition me or shape me for that. I mean, there's a lot of people with good money, a lot of good people with money, so don't get me wrong, not everyone, it's just my experience, and that I shied away from that. And I think that's probably why I joined the army, because I was seeking more than just fucking materialistic bullshit.
Yeah.
You know, and the negative, you know, the money, you know, money is necessary. We've got to earn money to survive and get by in life, but I don't think you need lots of money to be happy. You need just enough. I have just enough, and I'm happy with that. It's always nice to have a little bit more so you can do, but so I shied away from that, and it's, you know, living a fulfilling life and living with virtue and courage, you know, having good values and principles, because that's, you know, the very premise of one of the principles for Legion Barbell, Arete, is the literal meaning for it is peak, ridge of a mountain. The philosophical term is excellence of character in Greek philosophy. You know, and your character is shaped by your values and how you live your life. So for me, it's like being a good person, be the example, and, you know, trying to have a fulfilling life through, you know, good character and courage. You know, the courage to say the right thing and do the right thing, because there's very few people that do that, I feel.
Yeah.
And that's kind of me. That's how I live my life. I try to sort of encourage. That sort of shapes my coaching philosophy as well, and how my style of coaching.
Yeah.
So yeah, you know. So I think I've waffled enough.
I think you're someone that a lot of people could learn from. You've had this really great life experience, which has led you to these conclusions. But if the listener, anyone listening, could take one thing away from this podcast and your experience, one lesson, what would it be? One piece of advice.
One piece of advice. God, that's a tough one. Do you know what? I thought you were going to ask me that, but I wasn't quite sure, because I didn't see, you know, the other podcasts that you were asking. What was the one piece of advice? Yes. Be a good human.
Be a good human.
Be a good human.
I like it. Nice and simple.
Just be a good human being. And that's it.
Nice. Well, thank you for coming on the podcast, Gary. I really appreciate it. Where can people find you and your club?
We're in the dark depths of Dover, in the southeast of Kent, literally the arse end of the UK, in Dover. We're a small club looking to expand. Go on if you're looking for Olympic weightlifting, then go on the BWL Club Finder. You'll see us on there, or on Instagram, Legion Barbell Arete, or Legion Barbell on Facebook, or www.legionbarbell.co.uk.
I'll make sure I link it in all the show notes and everything anyway.
Yeah. Also, if I give you that book,
yeah,
link that in there, because I think it's a good book for people to read as well.
Yeah, 100%.
Try and build their mental fortitude.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Gary. Really appreciate your time.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Adventure Athletes podcast. If you like this episode, make sure you follow us on Instagram, Spotify and YouTube, and share our content around. It helps more than you can ever imagine. Now, if there's a person in particular that you want to hear from, or a topic that you want us to cover, just drop us a message, let us know in our DMs, and we'll make sure we try and reach out to the relevant people to cover that topic for you. We're always trying to make content that you guys want to listen to. We have just dropped our website. It's adventureathletes.co.uk, and you can go on there to find out the range of different services we offer. So we have sports massage, different training programs, and personal training, both online and in person, that you can sign up to on the website. So make sure you go and check us out at adventureathletes.co.uk.